Hello everyone! Managers, you've completed the tutorial, be the first few cantos, maybe the last ones as well, masterfully played, or you just priced win rate all the way through. In any case, you might still wonder how some of the mechanics work. Even if you somehow read through every tutorial, through every story, through every passive and skill trying to find a new clue, you still wouldn't know what to do, for quite a few mechanics are hidden, or some not properly explained. I'm missing a big ass manual for all the info. But anyway, this video is here for this. I'm not the biggest encyclopedia on Limbus company, but I've acquired over the 2 years knowledge of hidden inner mechanics and secret forbidden techniques that I'll try to compile into this little video. Some of it you might know already, some of it you might not. As a disclaimer, before starting, I'll be assuming you have some base knowledge for the game. Pretty much doing the tutorial, playing a bit, knowing the 7 colored scenes, keywords, how to use an ego, how to make coffee, I prefer tea, pay your taxes, extract IDs and egos, don't get what you want, cry in a corner over your gambling addiction, and remember you can dispense them. So like, if you know how to play without pressing win rate, we're good to start. And if you don't, well, you might learn how to here as well. I'll be making chapters over the main topics covered if you wanna see a particular section. Also, as I said, I do not know everything, so I invite people with interesting stuff that I haven't mentioned to comment about it or tell me if I made a mistake. So now, let's get started. And to start, let's go with stats. No, wait, don't leave, I'll be short on the math. So I guess I'll very quickly drop the damage formula in a corner once more and move on. You can come back to it if you want. But I wanted to talk about IDs stat this time. If you've ever wondered, the point of leveling up your IDs is actually increasing your stats. The most noticeable change is HP, but skills offense and defense level increase as well, as you can see that they are directly linked if you hover them. But you can see the coins rolling numbers and you might not understand where those come into play. Offense level has 2 utilities: increasing damage, as shown in the damage formula, with diminishing returns, but also increasing the clash power during clashes, for a value of 1 power every 3 difference in offense level. So if you have a skill with 58 offense level and clash against one with 52, you'll get 2 bonus clash power. Defense skills also have a defense level, increasing their values against attack skills in the same way. For counters though, it will have an offense level that will increase in attack power instead of clash power, but still in the same way of 1 power for every 3 offense level over the enemy's defense level this time. This can make some very high rolling situations for IDs like Middle Dawn. Fun fact, this is valid for regular counters, but not clashable counters and guards, which work like regular skills. Concerning offense levels, there are several ways to increase or decrease it. ID level, skills, statuses, but the lesser known one is resonance. So you might have seen that resonance, aka chaining skill of the same scene, is useful, but you might not have understood why. Well, the answer, outside of conditionals for egos or IDs like the middle, is that it increases the skills concerned offense or defense level. The values are as follows. Doing a regular resonance will increase the value of the skill the further they are in, while an absolute resonance will buff all the skills concerned in the chain, different absolute resonance working independently. The values are not additive. So when you do a 6 or 7 NV absolute resonance for an NV team, you're not just activating the conditionals for the IDs, but also increasing the offense or defense levels of the skill used by 7, so potentially 2 clash power and 20% damage increase, and even higher rolls for the counter. Of course, it will depend on the target. Now, that might encourage you to build teams around scenes, but well, not only keywords are more important for now, but also scenes and keywords often tend to be associated already, so doing a bleed team will give you many opportunities to play Lust or Gluttony with Rupture. Envy is the only scene for now with a real team archetype not fully linked with its keyword, Charge. Well, resonance might not always be your priority, as they have an arguably more important use, which is filling your scene gauge. The point? What, you don't like seeing numbers go up? Well, to activate passives for one, and then consuming those to activate egos. As you probably know, a bunch of passives now tend to have an activation condition based on the number of a scene you might have, as opposed to having enough resonance on the chain. So for example, Liu Yiseng's passive condition is having 4 Wrath scenes in the tank. This means if you wanna have some passive active quickly, you might seek to have many of said scenes used ASAP. I use Liu Sang as an example for a very simple reason. Having his SP passive active ASAP is great for early SP gain and then set up for down Sinclair, so searching for 4 Wrath on turn 1 is a good strategy. But well, once more, scenes and keywords tend to be associated, so that will often just not be an issue. It's still something to be mindful of when doing certain teams. However, it might be an issue depending on which egos you want to use. Egos also have a scene cost, so making sure you have a good spread of scenes in your team is important, or at least enough to fuel the egos you need. Let's say your team has no Gloom. Gloom is a very demanded scene, being present in many egos cost, and especially the most powerful ones. So either you just don't use those, getting alternatives, or you change a member or two of your team to get the missing scene. Good thing is you have tools in the UI to quickly check your scenes and egos. In the end, your choice, but with more egos and viable IDs being introduced, you should have more choices for your team composition, minus the overclocked power creep. Alright, now let's talk about stuff that happens during the fight. In regular fights, it can get messy, and most of the time you just win rate, most of them being trivial. Well, still here are a few things. During the fight, you can see on the bottom who got staggered, or if some skills didn't win their clashes. Well, nothing too big. You might have noticed with time as well, but skills you choose match slots on the enemy's side one by one, right? But let's say you've got 2 skills on the same target. If it dies with the first, the remaining skill will go on to the next target after the last skill of the chain as an unopposed attack, or the following target alive. This can be useful to know, especially in MD where those battles can become bothersome. If you can't clash with a skill, you might want to use defense instead, which might delay the action to the enemy's speed. If you have another sinner on the line later faster than the enemy, they might be able to stagger or kill them to avoid the interaction. If you have a faster sinner that you know will kill the target and launch an unopposed attack before the following sinner, you might also expect them to stagger or kill and avoid a losing clash, and still use an unopposed attack on the stagger target or the next one. Well, you don't have that much control over targeting or coin flips, so do your best to manage. If regular encounters become tough, mostly Mirror Dungeon, best thing you can do is use a high attack weight ego and get as many staggers or kill as you can to avoid losing clashes and sinners. Out of the lesser known things as well, let's get back to defense skills. Since an update early in the game, defense skills now work against the targeted unit. So in regular encounter, using an evade or block will only work against the target, or rather against the skill targeting it, which, for solo runs for example, can be annoying. For some reason, this isn't the case for clashable guards and counters, which work a bit like counter in Runa. They are added to the stack of skills against unopposed attacks, and therefore will clash against the first received unopposed attack, regardless of targeting. This can help in regular encounters to counter faster enemies' skills, and is important to know in focused encounters for enemies having those as well. Talking about the later, you can delay an evade or regular block by making sure it's targeted by one of the last sinner in the speed order. Regular counters react to the first hit received, so closer to clashable defense skills. For the rest of the tricks, I'll talk about focused encounters, where you might have more control over the fight. And while still on defense skills, evading multiple skills at once is a valuable trick to know. Evades recycle as long as they succeed. While it will only work against the incoming skill targeting it, it will then stay for the following ones. So if you have a sinner targeted by multiple skills, using an evade against the fastest one can allow them to avoid several unfortunate clashes or unopposed attacks, while allowing you to get more unopposed attacks. So which one happens first? Well, the rule is from fastest to slowest, the fastest often being on the right, like for body parts, then from left to right in the skill order for a single part. Also, while skill order seems often very inconsistent in regular encounters, for skills of the same speed, clashes happen before unopposed attacks. One of the last important tricks in fights, especially in focused encounters, is the targeting for sub-targets of skills with several attack weight. The rule for sub-targeting is that it will prioritize untargeted slots, then slots from left to right. So this is the case in this picture. Let's say you have 3 enemies with each 2 slots of 1 weight and 3 attack weight on your skill. You will need 2 skills to target 1 slot each on the first 2 enemies, leaving 1 slot untargeted for each of them. Then you can target the third with your AoE skill, and then it should target the 2 slots left alone. You can then reorder things as you wish afterwards. Just be careful, as switching defense skills tend to reset the targeting. The rules is also followed by attack weight gained during the fight. Therefore, taking back the example, with something like Spice Bushy Sang Skill 2, if you want the same slots to be targeted, you would have to leave those slots untargeted when the fight starts, and the AoE will target them. This is obviously very useful when having multiple targets. However, slots with more than 1 weight can screw you over, so be careful about that. Here are a few more general tips and things to be mindful of in fights, especially for boss fights. You have to stay mindful of annoying passives and get a grasp on how the fights work. Luckily, PM is trying their warning feature to inform you of the dangerous passives on bosses. Well, I'm sorry, but there's not many ways around it, you will have to read. One thing is they might sometimes have statuses, so you should check for anything new, and same for your sinners in some story fights. One of the biggest things to stay mindful of is mostly for keyword teams trying to calculate your count infliction and reduction. Keywords being the most common core for teams, it's important to know how to manage them properly. Burn has the least trouble, just needing to care about stuff like Liu skill tree conception. Charge and poise are also on the easier side, and poise can just be random, as if you crit early, it's just gonna hit your count for not much. The other 4 are the more tricky ones. Tremor's count reduction is mostly linked to your skill bursting it now, so you can calculate it more easily, but Rupture and Sinking are for every one of your hits. The way I use is generally for each skill in order, reduce the current count by the number of coins, and add up the count the skill adds, if there is any. You have to be careful of which coin inflict the count, like the Xionglu skill 3 inflicting count on the 3rd coin, and if there are conditionals for it, like winning clash or unopposed attacks for IDs like Eisho Ryoshu and Otis. Overall, maintaining the count is the most important part, followed up by actually increasing the potency. Rupture's potency infliction, for example, in current Eisho teams can be pretty slow, and you might search for it on some egos. But well, they already do insane damage by themselves. Bleed is probably the trickiest though, being very dependent on enemy behavior. The count is lost with their attack coins, so your control is limited to when you're clashing with them or not. Usually to stack, you would either want to stack up first with unopposed attacks and then let the enemy clash or attack, or clash with the most coins before starting to stack bleed potency and count for next turn. If you can afford it, losing clashes increases the number of coins the enemy uses and avoid them getting staggered, so you can use it to your advantage. Well, it's the most complicated status and it's not a keyword guide, so I won't go more into details. Playing it yourself and experimenting is the best way to learn them. However, I can add that it's important to differentiate the multiple activation triggers. A lot of them are on use and on combat start, for example, and those are very different. On use means you have to use the skill and will activate on clashing or an opposed attack. On combat start means it will activate even if the skill isn't used. This is relevant for IDs like Wild Hunt, getting Dullahan on combat start, therefore not needing to clash, and Eishos who mostly have on use on their defense skills and therefore need to have them clash. This makes a difference for stuff on the dashboard as well. Having before use or something else to change skills, like Malphos Empowered Skill 3, means it won't be displayed on the dashboard while managing. This will rarely be relevant if you are already aware of what skill is truly being used, but explains interactions like with Capo Mersault and his Ego Regret, only buffing skills on the dashboard. Since his skill 3 changes on the dashboard as it doesn't have specific trigger, it works. As another thing to add to the fight category, I guess I should mention that Stagger is very broken. You can tell the enemy's remaining actions, as well as do more damage most of the time. Well, you probably understood that already. Well, let me clarify a few things on staggering though, for enemies with multiple stagger thresholds. First, passing several stagger thresholds in the same turn increasing the stagger level. increasing even more the damage inflicted by raising the physical weaknesses. However, this only works on the turn where you stagger the target. The following turn it will be staggered, but you cannot increase the level or re-stagger by passing another threshold. Therefore, passing another stagger threshold on the turn after staggering is a waste, since you're not adding damage and effectively removing the threshold. The best course of action then is to either try to pass several stagger thresholds at once with massive nukes, or reducing the amount of damage on the following turn to chain another stagger afterwards. Of course, if you can break the part or inflict massive damage on the following turn, this might not be worth it, it depends on the fight. A reminder though that staggering and breaking a part isn't the same, so a broken part can still act if not staggered. As another advice on broken parts, be careful if the part can be severed or not. A broken part will have its physical weaknesses set to fatal, however if it's severable, you won't be able to target it anymore. In fact, once severed, the part will stop its attacks, but all attacks against it will also be cancelled. So if you're planning a huge burst turn on a severable part, you might want to not put too much power into it. Talking about burst turns, usually you would want to set up huge damage in one go. The way you set up a burst is by making sure its conditionals are fulfilled and by adding any power you can to it. A good example are for Pierce and Envy nukes to use Faust's X-Nails beforehand if you can, which will add some damage to it. As a small talk about how to increase damage, well, let's check the damage formula again quickly. Damage multipliers on skills nowadays can be pretty high, like let's say Firefix Gregor, who can go up to 160% on skill 3, 260% on the final coin. Any status infliction like Fragile will add to this, so 2 Fragile will make the 160% increase go to 180%, so from times 2.6 to times 2.8, which is not really a 20% total damage increase. Funnily enough, here if you're using it on a target with defense level similar to your level, so let's say 55, with a 5 offense level increase on the neutral target, it adds 16% damage increase. But if you can add another 5 level with like Anglusoro's Desire, you go to 28%, adding 12%. The fun part is, it ends up being slightly more effective than Too Fragile. However, as I said, it depends on the fight, and unless you're very familiar with the calculations and mechanics, you won't care about that. Damage is damage after all. Still, advanced stuff is what this video is about, and I couldn't stop myself from talking about math. Anyway, the conditions are not the same depending on the mode, so might as well talk a bit about the difference between them and how your approach can change. I'll consider 3 game modes: Story, Railway, and Mirror Dungeon. Excavations are closer to story stages. So for story, as long as you bring a good enough team, you can clear most of it. If you struggle, uptie and level up, maybe change your team. But here are a few things for story stages to consider. First, the indication at the start can help by bringing the recommended weaknesses. But most importantly, story stages are overall short fights. Yeah, not all of them. Thing is, your main point of focus should be to gain sanity for your sinners ASAP, as it might be the difference between an easy and a rough fight. Bringing SP passives, bring IDs with higher clash power at the start, using super BI or get resources early for a healing ego, are all things that might ease the fight tremendously. Using skill 2 or 3 to win early clashes for SP is advised. Bringing IDs with minus SP might also ease things, especially the broken one. Well, once your SP is up, you can win clashes more regularly and start to set up your plans. SP gain is also good for ego usage, which you're likely to use in boss fights for the bigger skills. Making sure you have the scene for those egos is important. If you're having trouble for boss fights, egos like Chains of Others are a really good thing to spam, like on the last phase of a hard boss. Afterwards, well, it's a question of understanding the boss mechanics. Railway ends up being not too far from story fights at first, but well, it depends on your goal. Railway fights are longer fights that you want to win ASAP. Once more, getting SP ASAP is recommended, as well as being sure you have the scenes you want. However, this time, due to the length of fights and the goal to go faster, using egos for damage can be recommended, especially for fights with multiple enemies, and the values of ego passives increase as well, due to being active for a longer time. Trying to get them online is then a priority. Scenes are especially important because you might want a lot of different egos due to the number of different fights. Having ASP link ego at the start of a section is especially helpful. If you want to optimize your turn count, you have to foresee which ego you want to use and keep the scenes for them. For example, if you want to go bleed, keeping scenes for Sanguine Desire at the start of later sections is advised. Same for strats that require killing an ally, with the likes of Fell Bullet of Thoracalgia. Preparation is all about making sure your team is able to slay every wave you're presented to in the least turn possible. Last, Mirror Dungeon, aka the sandbox or the playground. Forget IDs, weaknesses and all. Ego gifts are the cornerstone of everything working here. Your ID is only made up for synergy to activate said gifts, and that's about it. While you would still need levels and upties for the version. Having good AoE egos is key to clear some of the other waves. But well, with the addition of Infinity, and now the extreme difficulty, things have become slightly trickier, and rolling in with just a bunch of random IDs and gifts has become a bit or a lot harder. For the basics, getting a full team of a certain keyword and then getting said keyword fusion exclusive gift is a good start and should help you clear the first 5 to 10 floors, with a few more ego gifts. Then however, due to the immense scaling, especially on the later floors, you're gonna need a few more buffs. Exchanging skills is a good strategy, as well as upgrading your key gifts. Well, so far so simple. However, there's only that many ego gifts for your keyword, but you need as many buffs as you can. Well, here's the thing. Even if you don't have IDs of a certain keyword, it doesn't mean you can't make it work. It only really matters for gifts requiring a certain number of IDs of a keyword to activate, or those activating on the right skills. However, with the right gifts, any keyword can be used somewhat. The most commonly used is Poise. Get Nebulizer, a few gifts like Ornamental Horseshoe and 4-Leaf Clover, upgrade them, and all your IDs will have more than enough Poise for the fight, which allows you to take advantage of other gifts like Cigarette Holder, Finifugality, but especially Claymore Calm Water, which will increase your damage and stats dramatically. So once you got your major gifts for your keyword, branching towards Poise is usually the play if you're not already playing it. But this works with other keywords, adding additional buffs as well. Getting Charge, for example, grabbing the gloves and stuff like wrist guards, night vision goggles, or curriculum vitae will increase your stats. If you wanna clear extreme consistently, those are synergies you would search for. Even stuff less known like Broken Compass and Midwinter Nightmare, giving you Sinking to activate Melted Spring, and Artistic Sense being very good as well. Apparently the gifts also activate in the order you got them, so you might even want to get them in a set and order, for an application on first turn for example. I've been mentioning general keywords, but making sure you get strong gifts from specific theme packs is important, especially early on when you can't get them anymore, like a bunch of gifts from Hell's Chicken. Getting survival gifts for the late game is important, even more so if you ever want to try playing solo. Unhatched Embers or Investigator Badge will protect your sinners from inevitable death, with stuff like the Music Box also protecting against Stagger, or Ashen Constellation's Blessing protecting period. Those are all specific to theme packs, so getting them in the search at the start or going for their pack is recommended. For the extreme part, due to insanely high clashes, you might need to let some sinners die on turn 1 of a wave to activate some gifts, so those gifts can save your life. Again, there are a bunch of gifts you can get to make your team stronger, and that's what you should focus on in this mode. There's also a bunch of achievements there, so I'm gonna give us some advice to get some of them. Stuff like dealing enough damage in one skill mostly relies on specific skills. Sinking Deluge on Spice Bushy Sang is a classic, stacking Sinking to no end on an undying target like the candles, and then bursting it. Time Moratorium can also do it apparently, and with the amount of damage you can and need to get for extreme, getting enough damage is easier with proper gift setup like I said earlier. Then can be some niche skills like a fully prepared to claim their bones. Getting an ID speed to 20 can be achieved simply by adding up on gifts giving haste. With enough of them and a speedy ID, it shouldn't be too hard. Getting 80 clash power can be more troublesome. Some people found ways to do it with strats like Rushu's Force Much Flame, but overall getting a strong ID with all the gifts needed should work well. If you wanna get the shop achievements, there are a bunch of gifts reducing the cost for certain functions, so I advise getting them from the gift search at the start, alongside the right buffs. Speaking of Starlight buffs, if you wanna tackle the extreme mode, don't hesitate to take all of them fully upgraded. If you worry about the Starlight costs, with enough adversity, you will actually get benefits. Well, MD is still the closest thing to insanity here. So before ending, let me talk about something I probably should have talked about earlier, which is Durante. Once far enough into the story, you'll get access to Durante's power, being available once per day or per railway run. Those can be actually useful in the right situation, and if you really need them, it would be a shame not to use them. Bigritia is simple, slowing down the enemies so you can redirect clashes, but might be the least useful as you can restart fights easily if you get bad RNG. Superbia though can be incredibly useful, usually activated on tough boss fights to use an early ego, either for setup or for early SP gain. It mostly shines in Railway, where being able to set up early makes you win a bunch of turns and tends to be used turn 1 for it. The latest one, Morositasis, seems to be the least useful. However, in the latest floors of MD, with the enemies rolling impossibly high, using it to even things for 3 turns can save you from an impossible fight. This is especially true because lots of gifts can take a turn to activate, like Claymore Calm Water activating after a crit, so starting turn 2. Alright, I think that's already a good list. Due to the way a lot of the fights are influenced by unique mechanics, a lot of them will require specific setups or plays, so I cannot just explain every fight. I hope you could learn something from this video, and that it might help you with whatever the game decides to throw at you, nerfed or not. Some interactions can be more or less clear, and new ones are added with each new identity, especially with the 255 statuses every time. Still, again, if you have some info or advice that you feel might be useful to know and that you would like to share, feel free to comment about it. Meanwhile, I'm gonna have to grind to the bottom of the mines again, don't I? Yes, I hear the boss music. And at the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Final message, I haven't been very active these past weeks, but that's probably not gonna change much. Felt like doing a video like this one might be a good thing though, and them adding to the complexity with MD Extreme kinda pushed me more. Where it's not easy, clearly. Our Knights collab very soon though, after all this time of teasing it. Finally, time to unleash the polls. I'll be streaming it, I don't think there'll be a video for it though. I don't know what I'll do next outside of shorts and streams, so subscribe and check the community tab for more news every Monday. In any case, see you next time, and keep your sanity high in this slow descent into the inferno.